All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's final day of HathiTrust Community Week. This session is titled Birds of a Feather Discussion, using available usage data to understand HathiTrust use by your institution. I'm Melissa Stewart, Assistant to the Executive Director of HathiTrust, and I'm going to go over a little housekeeping before we get started. I want to remind you all that HathiTrust does have a code of conduct that applies even to virtual meetings that we have. The code is printed here. It's going to be put into the chat, and it's also available on the website. Please remember to report any issues if you feel the code is being violated in any of our sessions. Just a little technology overview. We are using regular Zoom. We are recording this session. Please keep your cameras off and your microphone muted for this session to limit distractions for the panel here. We will be using the chat for Q&A, so please type any questions that you have into the chat and we will read those at the appropriate time. My colleague Jessica Rohr will be monitoring the chat and also helping with technical support, so please message her if you're having any issues. Also, you can enable transcript. We have live transcriptions enabled if you need captions. If you're going to share about our sessions, and please do on social media, you can tweet us using the hashtag HTCW22. And I am going to now turn it over to Paul Fogel to get us started.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you everyone for joining. Good morning and or good afternoon, wherever you are. This session is about using available usage data to understand HathiTrust use by your institution. We have created a shared notes doc that you can use in addition to the chat for questions or for, one of the things that the panelists on the session are interested in addition to sharing their experiences, to hearing also from you ideas or activities at your institution that relate to assessing usage. So here is the notes doc. Oh, Jessica beat me to it. Thank you, Jessica. So in the time since all of us have joined or become HathiTrust members, we've all invested non-trivial amounts of resources in the collaboration, and I'm not just talking about financial resources. So given those investments, it's really in our interest to make sure that our institutions are making the best use of what HathiTrust offers to us and to our users. And there are a number of ways to assess usage at our institutions. And our panel participants today are going to describe some of the challenges as well as some of the novel ways that they're applying usage data to guide decision-making and activities at their institution. So as I mentioned a second ago, we're also interested in hearing from you about any efforts at your institution to analyze usage and what challenges you may have faced or what successes you may have achieved. Again, if you're willing to throw those into that notes doc, that would be wonderful so that we can kind of gather it all up. We're also interested in learning as well about what kinds of use cases you're interested in exploring, what kind of data sources you might want or need or are not able to find that would help you with those explorations. And so we're hoping the conversation at the end of these presentations will help draw out some of those topics. Speaking today will be the following: Renata Ewing from the University of California's California Digital Library, who's going to talk about the challenges of analyzing usage in the post-ETOS era. Chen Li from UC Berkeley is going to talk about how analyzing usage data during ETOS has informed usage tracking of a new controlled digital lending system at UC Berkeley called UC Bears. Selena Chow from UC Santa Barbara is going to talk about her work comparing HathiTrust usage with other e-resource platforms before, during, and after COVID. I guess we're not necessarily after COVID yet, but we know what she means. And Miranda Bennett from the University of South Carolina is going to talk about analyzing HathiTrust collection contents and how that has helped USC leverage decision-making about digitization and HathiTrust deposits. Next slide, please. Thank you. So generally, as a group, we're interested in exploring these following questions with you, and have kind of structured this session along these lines. Like, what type of questions are you trying to answer, and what metrics are useful to you now that some of the ETOS usage data is no longer available? How are you using existing data streams to gauge use at your institution? Do you have other methods that you find useful that you'd be willing to share with us? And how do you make decisions about what to digitize, what to deposit, and contribute to HathiTrust corpus? So to kick it off, Renata is going to start us out. So next slide, please. Take it away, Renata.
All right, thanks, Paul. Good morning. And actually, next slide, please. Right. HathiTrust's emergency temporary access service was unique not only because it allowed HathiTrust member affiliates to access in-copyright volumes for the first time, but also because it provided an important incentive for HathiTrust users to log on. The act of users logging on allowed HathiTrust to track and provide usage statistics for each member institution. The act of users logging on also improved Google Analytics data so that an institution could more successfully track HathiTrust use by their specific patrons. At the University of California, we're able to use the HathiTrust log data and Google Analytics to demonstrate the overall success of ETOS across all 10 UC campuses. But once libraries opened again for physical access and ETOS was deactivated, HathiTrust users no longer had an incentive to log in, and member institutions suddenly lost the ability to easily track HathiTrust use by their specific patrons. We wanted to convene this discussion with other HathiTrust members who are interested in usage data to find out what, if anything, they're using to gather usage data and how we can move forward. Next slide, please. We are interested in learning what your institution is doing or would like to do with HathiTrust usage data. And we're going to start with a simple poll. If you could please answer the question when it comes on the screen. So the final entry should be none, not no-y. The final option here. If everyone's had a chance to answer that, we could see the results. So 62% of people who responded have used the ETOS log data, 31% have used Google Analytics, 15% have used their ILS, 8% have used others, and 31% have not used any. So if you're one of the people that answered others, if you could, in the notes, in our shared notes document, if you could go in and write your sources, that would be really useful for everyone. Thank you. So we're also asking everyone to answer the following questions, and feel free to record your answers into the shared Google document. We'd like to know what types of questions you're trying to answer using usage data at your institution, and also what metrics are useful now that ETOS usage data is no longer available. So feel free to add your answers to these questions into the notes document.
Okay, we're getting some input there. Do you want to move to?
Sure. Okay, let's go to slide 11 then. And people can continue to write. Okay. During ETOS, I was tasked to use the HathiTrust log data in Google Analytics to create data visualizations that tracked UC's use of HathiTrust. However, since UC deactivated ETOS, it has been challenging to work with HathiTrust usage data. But here is one recent use case. Last summer, the libraries of all 10 UC campuses implemented a shared ILS, and we want to answer the following question. Are UC's new campus catalog systems referring users with links to full-text HathiTrust volumes? Before ETOS, only a few campuses included links to full-text HathiTrust volumes in their catalog search results. During ETOS, most campuses began including HathiTrust links for both ETOS accessible and full-text volumes. But what's happening now? To help answer this question, or at least initiate our exploration of the issue, we found the referrals data in Google Analytics to be useful. Next slide, please. While UC now has a shared ILS, each of the 10 UC campus library search systems in Primo can be adjusted individually to show certain sets of search results. Campus libraries make local decisions about linking to full-text HathiTrust volumes. We're trying to understand how HathiTrust links are being surfaced. We want to compare the period before ETOS started to the period after our shared ILS was implemented and ETOS was discontinued. In this visualization, you can see that the UC Berkeley Library Catalog referred many users to HathiTrust full view volumes before ETOS started. During ETOS, the number of referrals greatly increased because links for ETOS volumes, non-full view, were also included in the search results. However, once ETOS was discontinued and the new search system was implemented, referrals to HathiTrust dropped dramatically. Okay, next slide, please. For UC San Diego, referrals before and after ETOS follow the same pattern as those for UC Berkeley. At first glance, it appears that the new search system is referring dramatically fewer patrons to HathiTrust. And the next slide. For UCLA, we see the opposite pattern, that their system appears to be referring many more patrons to HathiTrust than the old system. Due to these variations, we intend to conduct a more careful study of how and when HathiTrust volumes are included in each campus's discovery systems. And I will now turn this over to my colleague, Chan Lee at UC Berkeley.
Thank you, Renata. Hello, everyone. I will focus more on one use case at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, which is the controlled digital lending platform that we have been implementing since ETOS ended. And I will talk about the usage comparison between the ETOS period and after the ETOS period when we have our local controlled digital lending system. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm pretty sure most of you have known what controlled digital lending is, but just in case, I will talk about it, the definition of the controlled digital lending. Controlled digital lending is a way that allows libraries to provide digital access to their users in a way that's similar to print lending model. It means that the library can only circulate exact number of copies of a specific title it owns, regardless of format. It also prevents users from redistributing or copying the digitized version. So one thing to note is that as long as the controlled digital lending system is implemented to reflect the print lending model, it is currently allowed to use under the existing copyright law as fair use. So the HathiTrust ETAS is a proof of concept in regards to the power of having a collective digital holdings that can be circulated through controlled digital lending model. And because of huge impact and success at our campus, we have implemented a local controlled digital lending system since ETAS ended. So before I talk about our experiences and the usage from our local controlled digital lending system, which is UC Bears. So I want to ask audiences a question first. So that's the poll that you see, the poll number 2 here. Has your institution used a controlled digital lending system or similar access model since ETAS ended? So the choices are either yes or no or not sure. So maybe we can see the results now. Thank you. So there are 6% people say yes, which is interesting. Most of the institution haven't done that, and 13% indicates not sure. So I'm very curious for people who answered the yes. I'm wondering what controlled digital lending system is your institution using right now, and what typical use cases are. And you can put your answers into the shared document that Jessica just put the link into the chat. It's the same document, and feel free to answer the questions there. And I'll give you maybe a minute. I'm not sure 6% of our participants is how many institutions have used the controlled digital lending. Okay, I think I will move on, but feel free to continue put your comments there. Thank you. So I will talk about the our system, the local system, which is called UC Bears. It's UC Berkeley Electronic Accessible Reserves System. UC Bears is a type of controlled digital lending platform that is developed in-house and open source by Berkeley Library IT. It was inspired by the work done at Caltech Library as they developed their CDL, the controlled digital lending platform for e-reserves. It has been used by our library since the fall 2021 semester to provide access to digitized versions of books for reserve programs. So why do we want to implement a controlled digital lending system? During the pandemic and the building closure, ETAS has given our researchers, our users, critical access to more than 13 million digital volumes. The access model is considered as revolutionary because typically in the past, if UC users wanted to request a book through, say, interlibrary loan service, the turnaround time can be pretty fast. It could be within 24 to 48 hours. But under the ETAS model, our users can digitally reserve books from other UCs within seconds. And also the volume of those accessible materials is tremendous. ETAS allows UC users to access more than 13 million digital volumes, but that also includes the 6.7 million volumes in the public domain. And during the whole ETAS access period, we have done lots of assessment on the usage and impact of ETAS service with other UC campuses and with California Digital Library. All of the findings indicate that ETAS service has been very impactful and valuable to our users for their learning, teaching, and research. And also, since the pandemic started, we started to offer an e-reserve program in parallel to instructors, where the faculty and instructors can request digital links for the course reading materials that they have signed to their students before each semester starts. So the library, after we receive those requests, either do some research to find the links, or license the ebooks, or scan them and deposit them into HathiTrust in order to provide the links back to the instructors. So during that period, the building closure, half of our e-reserve title requests come from the e-task collection. Some of the content was already digitized in e-task, available in e-task, but some of the titles, they have to be locally digitized and then deposited in e-task. And because of this e-reserve process and program, we're able to track how much of the e-task uses come from the course reading materials. And it turned out that the course reading is a big use case of e-task collection. So based on the general success and the impact that we have, the e-task collection have, and also the success of the course reading use case, we have decided to implement the UC Bears system right after e-task ends. Next slide, please. So here are some UC Bears, our system features. I will read through it quickly. Digitized items are not available for download or printing. They are only available to log into users at Berkeley. Print items available through the UC Bears will not be available for the public to use on site or taken off the shelves. They are moved to a non-circulating location. A number of simultaneous online users is based on the number of copies, the print copies that we have at Berkeley. And then digital items can be checked out for 2 hours. Items are renewable at the end of the loan period, at the end of the 2-hour loan period. So those are the features that we implement. And as you can see, they're very similar to what we had with the e-task. And we definitely understand that some of them are access barriers and challenges for users. So when we did this assessment with California Digital Library and other UC campuses, we have conducted many user studies on their experiences using e-task, and particularly around those access barriers. And what we found is that our users are actually quite tolerant of some of the limitations, such as not able to download or only 2-hour loan period, because they value more about the access to a broader scope of digital collections in general. So in general, we found that they're more tolerant to those limitations that we have. Next slide, please. So here are I want to give you some data for the two systems that we have. So this is some background about the context of the two systems and differences between the two systems. For e-task collections, first of all, our users have access to a lot more titles. We have 4.5 million e-task titles, and we had about 17 months of access from April 2020 to August 2021. And during this period, about 81,000 titles were used. There were 165,000 usage in total. And e-task collections, they can be used for all kinds of purposes like research and course reading or teaching. So compared to that, UC Bears, we only started in the fall 2021, and there are only about 1,100 titles available because the service and access is only limited to course reading materials that are requested by the instructors and digitized by the libraries. So those 1,100 titles are the requested book titles for course readings for about 2 semesters. We're still using the UC Bears, but just for this analysis, I only capture I only capture this this period here, the 2 semesters. So this analysis only limits to about 8 months of the data from the end of August 2021 to April 2022, so this year. So out of the 1,100 titles, 68 were checked out on UC Bayer's platform, and there were about 20,000 uses over the 2 semesters. Next slide, please. And here is our usage trends from ETAS when there's no print circulation activities to UC Bayer usage when our library buildings were open. And that's focused on the bar charts now and ignore the gray line for now. So a couple of things that you can notice from these trends. So first of all the blue bars from April 20 to August 21, those represent ETAS usage. So the awareness of the ETAS service has grown dramatically since the service started. The peak months of for ETAS is last year, February 2021 to April 2021, the spring semester of 2021. We have about every month during the 3 months period, we have about 16,000 uses to 18,000 uses at Berkeley alone. The orange bar there, that combined with the blue bar, they're also ETAS use, but those are particularly for course reading materials. Course readings, is identified as one of the biggest use case for ETAS collections. But over the period of entire ETAS access, about 20% of the ETAS usage come from the titles used for course reading. But if you only focus on the peak months, the spring semester, about 28%, so almost a third of the ETAS usage come from the course reading. The yellow bar, starting in August 21, the short bar, and then going through April 2022, those are our UC Bayer usage. Because they're only for course reading, so they are actually more comparable to the orange ETAS usage bar there. So if you compare those two, you can see that the usage level for course reading on UC Bayer's is about the same as the ETAS course reading usage. The difference is our buildings actually opened since the semester started. So it shows that even when our library buildings are open, our users are still accessing the digital copies of their course reading materials online. And now let's look at the gray line there. Those are our print circulations since the libraries are open. We had a lot of checkouts in September 2021. That's the first month of reopening. So there's a lot of excitement there. But if we compare 2 spring semester, one is the last year, 2021 spring, February to April, to this year, February to April, the total ETAS usage is not too far from the print circulation, even though they're not apple-to-apple comparison. The total ETAS usage is about the 65% of the print circulation that we have this year for the spring semester. So based on this, I think there are 2 points, interesting points there. ETAS collections has definitely helped our users to fill in the access gap for 17 months when the buildings were closed. But then the preference for the digital access, it continues even after the buildings are open. So I think, when we look at this 2 system, the usage, it really demonstrates the value, the impact, and the feasibility in sharing digital content. So with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Selena.
Thank you, Jan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending. My name is Selena Chow, and I'm the collection strategist librarian at UC Santa Barbara Library. And my topical focus is humanities and social sciences. But I worked with some of the other presenters in this group, in the ETAS group for University of California, when we were members, and trying to find information about usage to inform about UC patrons as a whole, and also for our local users. So my thought on this is, as a collection strategist, I'm looking at a lot of data. I have bounds of my own responsibilities, but obviously all the services in the library are related. And so we want to gather and share, look at these information. My interests are looking at trends of print to electronic. And we had an extra challenge in the past few years with the pandemic and change of service and access to materials. But I'm going to present on some things that I found, and hopefully you'll share along with me in the shared notes doc. Next slide. So my poll question is about what challenges and assessment strategies you may be looking at your institution. There are many ways to use data. Perhaps there's some new ideas that you have that can help with not just looking at HathiTrust holistically, but informing other areas of your library work. So for mine, it'd be for selecting materials and looking at budget as well. So some of the things and you can choose more than one or write it in a notes doc. But some of the things I have thought about is maybe the use of data helps to know patron needs in advance to engage patrons more with library materials. Is it perhaps used in regular assessment for different kinds of collection acquisition strategies? Do you look at nitty-gritty information on type of use, limitations to electronic resources? And how has it helped in other aspects of your work, maybe moving from print to electronic? And as people are thinking about that, maybe writing in, I can go ahead and continue with the next slide. So I'll adjust the slides later, as Paul pointed out. I think it's more accurate to say use of materials before, during, and after ETAS. We are still in our campus in a transition period, hybrid working, remote courses, things like that. But I wanted to look at ways in which HathiTrust either mirror or can point at other usage of other materials. So the content HathiTrust is just one of the offerings we have. And obviously during pandemic, it was a different type of content. It was a replacement, so to speak, for our physical holdings. And so we'll see information and graphs that show that. But the HathiTrust usage data, it can be a comparative performance model to other collection strategies that we use in the library. We have an approval plan, we have a DDA, we have a lot of open resources. And the challenge here with HathiTrust data and also other data we have is it's not always consistent, it's not complete. So I'll just share some of the things I was looking at and observed from our data. Next slide. This is our HathiTrust use per calendar quarter year. And it echoes some of the things that Chan mentioned. We looked at what people were doing before ETAS, during, and after. So during is a different kind of service provider of content. And even after ETAS ended, we do see a lot more awareness and use of HathiTrust, 3 times more unique page views and also sessions than the highest quarter before our pandemic started. So I think that even though it is not a direct comparison to other loans or calendar 5 metrics, it's a good trend model, right? To understand how users are going through electronic resources. So I wanted to just share a little bit more about the data that we can get out of Google Analytics. So this data is filtered by our users, or UCSB, how people are accessing HathiTrust content. As far as referrals, we can look at searching by part of domain name. So our learning management system is called Gaucho Space after our mascot. So I wanted to look at this as well, kind of in line with what we're looking at for patron uses. Theoretically, a lot of teachers will be putting course readings into the learning management system and their links to different resources. So that was one aspect of that. Again, GatcherSpace, I could search for that URL in the Google Analytics of the referral. And so that's how I got this information. I'm going to present some information about comparing HathiTrust Google Analytics to Counter 5 usage. Again, it's not a direct comparison, but there's some things that I wanted to look at and make a little bit more comparable. So there is a difference between how HathiTrust logs the usage information. It's a bit page by page, as opposed to what vendors provide for ebooks, for example. It's by chapter or full title, or in general, all investigations to an ebook title. Sessions for Google Analytics is up to 30 minutes per unique user. And for Counter 5, the session is counted as a 1 hour slice in time at the hour until the end of that hour. So a user is in the same session at 1:05 versus 1:45. And then it resets at 2 p.m. So it's a little bit different in case you're interested in doing a little bit more equal comparison. Next slide. So in the next slide, we'll look at some data in Counter. You can have that next slide. Maybe I have a lag.
We'll see if we can get that up for you.
Oh,
Melissa
no
may have
problem.
dropped off. Hold on a second.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Thank you all for multitasking and running the meeting in the background. I appreciate it. Okay, so we are trying to use Counter 5, and I do know that usage for books, I would prefer to see the use over many more years. However, with the different standards, the data is only consistent for the past few years, and this is what it looks like. As I mentioned, I work mostly with humanities and social sciences materials, which helps because in our ETOS assessment, and again, there's a link to that report in the notes, the shared notes doc. We've had some findings that a lot of the users supported humanities, social sciences, and there's a lot of monographic support. So then I chose maybe our top 5 ebook platforms. The JSTOR, the yellow bar, is significant because it's our only DDA program. And there was more awareness of that platform before ETOS pandemic. And then so users kept on going there. Then the other observation I saw for our collections is that comparatively to other platforms I looked at, the EBSCO platform stayed relatively consistent. Again, I can't make any claims to why that is, but it's helpful to know and to dive in a little bit further when I look into selection strategies. A lot of things go into ebook usage. It could be the license, patient awareness, links from the catalog, things like that. But for me, this is interesting to see, especially when we look at the cost of these materials too. So the trends for overall usage of materials, electronic resources before, during, and after ETOS. For our campus, we see a lot more use in our spring and fall academic quarters, and it's outlined by the drop-in usage in the summer. Thank goodness our people are refreshing and take the time that they need, at least to not access ebook usage as much as when they're studying and researching in the spring and fall. Is everything, sorry, I want to make sure y'all can hear me. Is that me? Okay, good. Sorry, I just heard something. So I chose to look at unique item investigations, and this is a kind of multiplying use so that it matches the HathiTrust use a little bit more. Unique is combines interactions with the electronic content per session, which I mentioned a different session earlier. And then investigations, any kind of interaction with the content, not just a title view. It could be links to the ILL services that if that's connected to the e-platform.
Selena, I just wanted to give you a nudge
Sure.
about time.
Sure. I am on my last slide, so we'll go there. So to recap, looking at HathiTrust usage helped answer some inquiries that I was looking at. One was, do patrons attempt HathiTrust requests after attempting an ILL request? Or does an unsuccessful ILL request prompt searching in HathiTrust? So for this, I was really interested in understanding if limited use limited a user experience, and those questions and the next one also pertain to looking into that. And finally, it's a little bit of a lead into our next presenter, but we haven't done this yet, but I know that HathiTrust usage data and holdings information can inform some space planning projects, and especially as we're looking into physical to electronic shifts. So anything that you all want to share about how you're using the usage data to inform any of your library projects would be of interest. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Selena, and thanks to my colleagues for some really excellent presentations so far. So I'm Miranda Bennett. I'm Associate Dean for Collections at the University of South Carolina. So we're headed into the afternoon over here on this coast. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how you can use data to inform selection decisions if your library contributes to HathiTrust, or if your library is thinking about becoming a HathiTrust contributing library. So then if you can go on to the next slide, please, we have a real quick poll. It's a very simple question, which is just really to get a sense of who's listening today, who's in our audience. And this just asks if your library currently contributes content to the HathiTrust digital library. So yes, no, and I certainly understand if you don't know, that's fine. Not everyone in the library would necessarily be aware of this. But we can go on to the next slide while people are working on that poll. Poll should just take a second or two to respond to. So you might be wondering where HathiTrust content comes from. So I got some numbers from Natalie Fulkerson at HathiTrust recently. About 95% of the corpus does come through the Google Books project. So HathiTrust was founded on a basis of mass digitization. And that's still by far the largest source of content. About 3.5% coming from another large-scale project, the Internet Archive, and about 1.5% coming from member libraries' local projects. Just under a third of HathiTrust member libraries currently do contribute content, so we can see in the poll how representative our group is today. But 100% of HathiTrust member libraries are eligible to contribute content. So I want you to keep that in mind if your library doesn't do that yet. Next slide, please. I did want to take just a minute to tell you about the Digital Collection Strategy Working Group, which I've been part of since it was started in 2020. This is the HathiTrust Working Group, and the conversations and work of that group have really informed my thinking about this topic, about prioritizing selection for contribution to the digital library. So part of our charge is to work with HathiTrust member libraries to think about how they might prioritize the content they contribute with a particular aim, a particular goal of diversifying the HathiTrust digital library. Next slide, please. So if your library does contribute, or if you're thinking about it, you might be asking yourself some questions about how do I prioritize? How do we make these choices? Most HathiTrust member libraries have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of print volumes in their collection. So there are any number of criteria that you might consider. And there's some listed here. I'd invite you, if you'd like, to put additional thoughts into the shared notes document. One thing I'll point out here is that there are a couple of cases on this list, and these are things we've talked about in the working group at various other contexts, where they're really opposite. For example, items that are in the public domain those might make sense to contribute because then they become available not just to member library affiliates of member libraries, but to everyone, at least to access that content. So there would be a real value to contributing those materials. Alternatively, you might want to prioritize material that's in copyright. You might be a bit of a pessimist and be on the lookout for the next disaster that might close your library and require you to reactivate the ETOS service. Or you might be looking over the horizon at what's next with controlled digital lending, as you heard about earlier from Chan. So at that point, you might have a real interest in having digital copies of things you have in print, even if they are still under copyright protection. So these are some of the things that might come to mind. And then you need to think about, well, how am I going to access the necessary data to develop some sort of list of candidates for digitization? So that's what I want to talk with you a little bit about. All right, so next slide, please. So how can you identify the materials in your library that might be worth digitizing and contributing? First, one thing that I'm thinking probably you'd be interested in is contributing things in your library's collection that are not already in HathiTrust. And then you might want to take that list and dig a little deeper into it and look at things like, are these items likely to be in the public domain? Might they contribute to diversity? Are they things that are a high priority for digital preservation? So materials maybe in a sub collection of your library. I do want to put a couple caveats on what I'm going to talk about in terms of process. One is that HathiTrust does not at this point provide detailed guidelines for how you might make these choices, but that is work that is actively underway. The Digital Collection Strategy Working Group is very well aware that this is a real interest among member libraries, and it's exciting to think about working on that in the coming months. And then the second caveat is a very practical one, which is we are an Alma library, like now the UC system. And so this is based on doing work within Alma, specifically Alma Analytics. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide, please. So the first question is what's in your library and not already in the HathiTrust digital library. And here you can use the HathiTrust overlap report. You may have become quite familiar with this during the ETOS era if your library used ETOS, because this was a file that you would find in your, at the time, for a time in your Box account, now in Dropbox, along with the ETOS usage reports. So what these show are, it's a long list of OCLC numbers with some really simple data. And this is indicating whether your library would, items in your library match things in the digital library, and then whether they are in copyright, whether you would have access or not. During ETOS, both allow and deny titles would have been available to you, or items, and outside of ETOS, things that are allowed would be. But the things that where that access and rights columns, where those are blank, those are items that, again, caveat, according to an OCLC number match, are not in the HathiTrust digital library, but they are in your collection because this overlap report is based on your the holdings report that your library provides to HathiTrust. All right, so you take a look at your overlap report. You can get that in Dropbox. You can also send a message to the feedback address if you need help finding that. And then what do you do once you've figured out, well, how many columns or how many rows have those blanks? Let's go on to the next slide, please. You might have a pretty big number to work with. So the overlap report I was working with, I ended up with 428,417 OCLC numbers, which is a lot. And as I was looking at slides from my colleagues on the West Coast, their collections are, they're looking at orders of magnitude more than we have here at South Carolina. So the numbers would be even bigger. But you can use OCLC numbers to build fairly large filters that you can use in Alma Analytics. I've been able to cram about 60,000 OCLC numbers into a single analysis. I do suggest that if you do that, you have some sort of activity, something to read, tidy your workspace, because it will take a lot of huffing and puffing on the part of analytics to get through it. But you can then generate a list that you can add whatever bibliographic information and local information you'd like based on the criteria available in a physical item search in analytics. So it's really pretty cool. The example that's up here, it's too blurry probably for you to see, but this includes a location code that shows items in our offsite storage facility that are also in the general collection. I could go in and change literally one letter in that search, and I could pull up items that are in our general collections, open stacks, items that are in various special collections just by changing that location code. So it's a pretty powerful tool once you get that filter built. All right, then once you have that list, if we could go to the next slide, please. Once you have your analysis ready, then you can add other filters. You can, or you can just add these fields if you just want to scan the list. So, which are likely to be in the public domain. You can filter by publication date. Adding diversity, one option might be to look at call number, using that as a proxy for subject, and looking at maybe areas of collection strength for your library that potentially could increase the diversity of the digital library. Items that might need digital preservation here, if you have locations set up for some of your special collections, for example, might be something to take a look at. And of course, these will be items that by definition have OCLC numbers, so you won't be pulling up manuscript collections and things like that. Once you've built your analysis, it's very easy to go in and experiment and play around with these filters and criteria. So I encourage you to do that, learn more about your local context. All right, next slide, please. And then identifying widely, rarely held items, I will just say good luck. You can do a little bit with WorldCat. I've done some things in First Search, sort of. You can put a few OCLC numbers in there at a time and see holding libraries, some retention data. Green Glass obviously is a much more powerful tool, but it does require a significant financial investment. So that's something that there's some possibilities maybe of working with HathiTrust to do some analysis of the holding information that they have for member libraries. I think this will be a really interesting place to explore. All right, next slide. This is my friendly reminder that all of this depends on the quality of metadata, which it never takes long in a HathiTrust discussion to get to this. It's one of my favorite slogans: no metadata, no future. And it's a good reminder that you can't ask questions of the data if the data are not there, or if they're not, if they're not clean and weren't entered correctly and accurately in the first place. All right, we've got one more slide to wrap things up, and this is just to say, what should you do next? I would encourage you to talk amongst yourselves in your libraries. If you are already a content contributor, how could you do that more strategically or intentionally? And that might be with local projects, or it might be through your participation in Google Books or the Internet Archive. We've got our poll up here. So but over half of respondents are already contributing in their libraries. That's great to see. So it's a little overrepresented in this group, which is wonderful. If your library doesn't contribute content, would you like to start? And what information would you need? And then ask questions, investigate your collection, see what's there, start thinking about what your library could bring to the HathiTrust Digital Library that would make it a richer and more diverse shared resource for all member libraries. So thank you very much. We have, I think, just a couple minutes for questions, and I think there were maybe a few in the chat.
Thank you, Miranda. I apologize for being the worst timekeeper ever, that we've left no time for a larger discussion and questions among amongst you. Mike asked whether UC has made any attempt to compare content availability of various ebook packages with each other, with the 10 UC campuses and against HathiTrust. And no, we have not yet. We've just kind of gotten the tools in place where we could start doing something like that, but we're still trying to figure out how to work with those. And we've got so many other things that with the integrated library system that we need to work out first. So Marie, yeah, for those who can stay on, I'll try and work through the questions as quickly as possible. Marie asks, never understood whether there is a pathway for a library to receive a donated book and rather than add it to the collection, destructively digitize it for HathiTrust. How could they get it there, and do libraries accept this sort of thing? Yeah, getting set up to digitize and contribute to HathiTrust is takes a little while. And sometimes it might be easier to use vendor digitization or kind of existing content contribution workflows like Google or Internet Archive or what have you. But perhaps there's other responses to the question among my panelist friends. Yeah, Selena, I like your response there, that this is a good question. Is there a way to create kind of a shared pathway that could be used by the greater HathiTrust community? Is that kind of what you were saying, Selena?
Yeah, it reminded me that when I worked in archives, we did try to support individual needs with the Internet Archive, and we digitized a lot of different kinds of things, audio, video, and the requirements and sign off, regarding copyright is probably different than HathiTrust. And it's a good question because I never thought about that. So for us, it would be an interesting response for maybe like these donor requests that we get from community members of, I have this book, and like how to deal with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, we're at time. Thank you everyone for your patience. I would encourage you to continue to add to that shared document questions, and we'll try and post some answers. And it looks like the chat is being captured there as well. And thanks to Melissa and everyone on the HathiTrust staff for facilitating this and helping us all out. And yeah, on behalf of my co-presenters, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.